Hello, hello, everyone. Great to see you all. Welcome again to Piano Tech Radio Hour. A wonderful Saturday afternoon or late morning or potentially middle of the night, depending on where you are in the world. Here in Chicago, it's windy as it typically is. A little bit rainy the past few days, but not as cold as it could be. So yeah, great to have everyone here. Good to see you. Thanks again for joining us. Been having a lot of fun with these review sessions. Hey, look, it's Adam Holmes from our team in New York. Good to see you here. Yeah, we've been having a lot of these review sessions lately, which is pretty cool. Just trying to give you guys a sample of the content that we have in the library. You know, some folks who haven't consumed it might not know what's available, and also just kind of cover a theme, you know, see it from a few different angles, or see like a particular technician from a few different angles, the different topics that they're teaching about. So today, the topic will be action balancing, and we have I was able to fish out very quickly at least three great pieces of content on action balancing. We have a little bit from David Stanwood himself, some from Mario Egrak, who does a great job explaining action balancing techniques, and then also Jude Reveley out there in the Boston area. He did a lecture called Turbocharging a Grand Action and talked quite a bit about action balancing. So let me give an intro to the session. And, you know, if anybody has any questions or issues to start with, feel free to write them in the chat, but I'll give an intro and then I'll hop into our first lecture. What I want to start with is about 10-15 minutes from Mario Egrak, because he kind of does a great job sort of explaining some of the basic concepts. And then we'll move on to a snippet of a lecture from David Stanwood, kind of the father of action balancing in many ways. And then we'll hop on over to the Jude Reveley lecture. But for those of you that are here today and, you know, maybe for the first time, let's tell you where you are. This is Piano Tech Radio Hour, and we gather here every Saturday to meet with and learn from the most fascinating and knowledgeable folks in the piano world, including manufacturers, rebuilders, musicians, makers of other instruments, and of course, piano techs. Our mutual goal is to become better at our craft, to help each other, and of course, create an ever more musical world together. Piano Tech Radio Hour is brought to you by Piano Technicians Masterclasses, an online learning resource that brings you cutting-edge instruction from piano industry masters without leaving your home. You can find out more at pianotechniciansmasterclass.com. For folks out there in, you know, Facebook, YouTube land, we'll pop some links into the chat so that you can figure out how to join us today, and we'd be happy to have you along for the ride. So, yep, without further ado on that, let me share my screen and we'll get rolling on the content.
They already had some background in this and have learned these formulas, just so you know how to apply them in the context that we're talking about. But you should be able to come up with answers to most static balancing questions by just doing mental math. So mental math is a very important aspect of this. Okay. So moving forward, action as a lever is essentially, the action is a set of levers that transfer force from the finger to the hammer. And first we have the key and then we have the whip and finally we hammer, the hammer shank and hammer. Those three levers interact, and by interacting, they transmit whatever you do on the key, and transfer that to the whip, which then lifts up the shank, pushes the shank up, and lifts the hammer. So you have the action essentially doing. So you have the action at rest, and you have the action that's fully, at escapement. Those levers look like that. Okay. All right. The angle within each lever doesn't matter, and the action really could be laid out like this. And so you could have the key on the right, lifting the whip in the middle, and then the shank and lifting the hammer on the other end. And notice how much the levers move. When you on the right side, when the arrow is going down a certain amount, the hammer is going up a much greater distance than the key. So this is essentially the breakdown of our action. Each lever has a different ratio, and those can be measured geometrically, and that's where Nigro-Vanya's program comes into play. So, for example, we can measure the key as having a ratio of 0.5 to 1. And for those of you who are used to thinking of that as 2 to 1, let's keep in mind that when we say leverage in the piano, we're not talking about the leverage that the finger has over the hammer. We're talking about the leverage that the hammer has over the finger. and that's it's all kind of going backwards. All of the leverages talk about the amount of movement of the hammer in relation to the key. And that's why 5 to 1 relates to, movement of 5 units to movement of only 1 unit at the key. And we'll see how that works. Just remember that we always have to be consistent and look at the leverages, and for purposes of calculations, etc., look at the leverages from the same side. So in this case, I'm looking at it from the hammer side. And it means that the key, because the key now flows from the whip-in to the tip of the finger, is looked at as 0.5 to 1 rather than 2 to 1. Okay. The whip-in typically is around 1.5 to 1, and the shank is the staggering 7 to 1. If you measure and just put in all of these numbers into these equations, what you can do is you can combine these ratios, and you can then reduce them, because the ones here are insignificant and all those numbers stay. So we can reduce them to this formula, so to speak, and then with that we can calculate the total geometric leverage ratio, and in this case we get 5.25 to 1 in this action. Okay, it's just an example, but so 5.25 to 1, and that also approximates the ratio between the finger force and the force with which the hammer pushes down on the action. Because everything is laid out horizontally, we can equate forces with weight, right? When we put something on the scale, what we're measuring is really the force of gravity acting on a certain mass. And in this case, we're, because the action, again, is laid out horizontally, we can just say that the hammer weight is about the same as the force with which it pushes down on the rest of the action. So we would call that the force leverage ratio. Okay? All right. So force leverage ratio can be equated to geometric leverage ratio, but there's a little bit of a problem there. And there's this angle when you have multiple levers and when they transfer force from one to another, with this angle being 0. In other words, when the two levers are they're just continuing from one goes this way and then another one lays right on top of it. When you have this transfer of force, right, you don't have any dissipation. You don't have any loss of force transfer. But because of this alpha angle that I'm showing here, right there, okay, the force leverage of the hammer actually turns out to be greater, 5.6 to 1, then it gets reduced toward escapement as that angle gets reduced. And the force leverage, again, remember, difference between geometric and force leverage. So force leverage now gets reduced to 5.1 to 1. Let's look again. With the greater angle, we have some force dissipation that just goes through these vectors, is applied in a way that that there's some loss. And at escapement, it's about 5.1 to 1. All right. Now, that before I go forward, let me just stop here. Why this is important will be revealed later. So we'll definitely talk about it. And so here Ethan's asking because that this is because it pushes on the knuckle and not that little line I drew. Well, it's right. It's pushing on the knuckle. However, what happens with this angle here, if you look at the line between the tip of the knuckle and the center pin of the shank, all right, the vectors of forces that act on that, or via which the hammer transfers its weight down on the weapon, okay, that vector is now more aligned with the vector of the weapon lever. I don't know if that makes sense. That just that sounds like a very, very difficult thing. But anyway, just try to acknowledge the fact that in one spot, and that's between the weapon and the shank, there is some loss of force when the hammer is at rest. Okay, and that's the important thing to consider. All right, very good. Moving forward. Okay, so I'll move to this next segment, and then we'll take some questions after that. To better visualize this whole leverage business with three levers, and we get confused, and there's this alpha angle and all that. Let's just reduce the action to the simplest possible concept and look at it as a seesaw. So here you have essentially this is the piano action the way that it would have to look if we didn't have the actual action but had to have a 10-gram or so hammer on the end of the key like this. The key would have to be exceedingly long, and our instruments would be impractically long. So even if this was viable, and of course with this, what this reminds us of is a clavichord layout where we have a tangent at the end hitting the string, so looking something like this. And in the piano, of course, we want escapement. We want escapement badly. We want actually double escapement. So that's what the purpose of all that complication with the weapon, and all of these levers are adjusted to transfer the force just a certain way. But looking at the action as a very long key, we see that the axis of rotations moved very far off center, and we see that the key is doing this approximately, right? Okay. So by looking what this means, I mean, if we can somehow just look at the action as simply as this, that means that we can observe the weights and distances on either end, right? And our very long key would translate a short keystroke on this end to a longer hammer stroke on the other end. But what it would also do is it would translate a low hammer weight relatively low hammer weight on one side, on that side, to a greater play weight. And this is exactly what leverage of a device like a crowbar, for example, does, right? It gives us the advantage to move the longer end through greater distance, or through a greater arc, I should say. And through that, applying, say, 10 pounds of force with my hand, I can lift a piece of furniture that on that corner perhaps has 100 pounds. So it's the same thing with the action, except that it works the exact opposite way. What we're doing, if we looked at the action as a crowbar, our finger is on the shorter end of the crowbar, and that was very surprising to me when I started thinking about this in this way. We have essentially, we're catapulting the hammer to some extent by pressing the key very little, and we're expecting the hammer to go through a much greater distance. So keep that in mind as you think about this. If we know the leverage ratio, then we can measure one end and calculate the other end, right? And that means that we can have also a methodology that gives us non-invasive measurement, and that is what practical touch analysis is. We don't have to dismantle things in the action. We don't have to actually measure the hammer weight by taking the hammer off the rail and measuring it on a scale. We can actually measure some things in the action and derive or calculate the hammer weight on the other side. All right. We can also do vice versa, and the hammer weight. If we know, for example, that we're installing hammers of a certain weight, we can then, by calculating, calculating the play weight, or we can again come up with what the forces that the finger is going to have to apply to the key. All right, so the summary of grand piano leverage is that 3 levers can be looked as a single lever and as a seesaw. The force leverage can be roughly equated to geometric leverage, at least very close to escapement, and maybe not so much with hammer at rest. The leverage translates the long blow distance to short dip, and a light hammer to greater play weight, whatever your play weight, but we'll disassemble that shortly, but to the force of the finger. And then the action leverage allows predicting the force or weight on either end of the action. Okay, very good. If you have any questions.
All right. Get into the very basics there. Great explanations from Mario Ygric. Very quickly, I'll take a minute for the folks that are on. Let me change my headphones real quick. The folks that are out there on socials, make sure I provide them with a link so that it's easy for them to jump onto here, because I realize I forgot and I need my computer to do that. But just to follow up on what the content that we're sharing today is, so like this from Mario Ygric is a nice lecture where he kind of goes through not only ways to understand action balancing, but some simple methods that you can use to kind of check a piano and get a basic idea of what the client might need, and kind of sort of move them forward on that type of a job, stuff like that. And so that's really cool. And as we move on to this next segment, we're going to go to actually David Stanwood, right? So David Stanwood kind of came up with a lot of these basic principles. He has his own ways of explaining them, and then throughout the years, different people have different perspectives, right? So someone like Mario Ygric can kind of come in here and take perspectives from various directions, including David Stanwood, and present them in his own way. And of course, you can see some of these basic concepts within his book as well, which is pretty cool. But then, we can go back to David himself and take a look at what he's doing. And in this particular lecture, he's presenting a methodology he calls the SNAP system, which is a bit different from what he initially came up with. And it wasn't a bit of an effort to try to kind of simplify the way the concepts are presented. So we'll get into that. You can take a look, and hope you get something out of that. And then again, we'll go on to some content from Jude Reveley. Thanks everyone for being present, and we'll get on to enjoying the next lecture.
Friction component, friction traditional 28.3 grams to determine how much weight it actually takes to move that key gun to go down. Now, the other thing about down weight is that it's not really a weight. It's the amount of weight it makes to make the key move, but it's actually got a weight and a friction component. And if we take can we zoom in on this? We got this okay? If we have a down weight, let's say 50 grams, and an up weight of say 20 grams, and we repin, let's say we have a hammer shank that's tight. And we repin that hammer shank and we make it looser. We're reducing the friction. What's going to happen is that this weight, down weight's going to get lower because friction is lower. So it might go to 45. The up weight, which is impeded by friction, more the friction, the lower the up weight gets. If there's too much friction, the key actually sticks and won't move. But if we reduce friction, the up weight will go up. And we can see that if we extrapolate, as we reduce friction, up weight and down weight get closer to each other. We can't eliminate friction completely in a piano action. There's always friction, which is actually a desirable thing. But we want to do a weight analysis. We need to extrapolate the point to zero friction, which is halfway between. So if we have a 20, 50, that's 35. This number, which is halfway between down weight and up weight, is called balance weight. And it's a very important, very central concept when you're using up weight and down weight. In order to understand how an action balances, you need to measure both up weight and down weight and find that point halfway between, which is friction weight. That balance weight. Now, starting with the balance weight, if we can imagine that the key is like a scale. If we put 35 grams on there, the key is like standing on a scale. It's holding right still. If we start adding weight to that scale, 36, 38, 40, it won't move until we get to 50, and then it starts to move down. Taking away weight, it won't move until we get to 20. So it's going to take 15 grams. And 15 grams. So this concept of balance weight is actually central to understanding what I call touch weight metrology, which is what we're doing. Now, down weight is a very poor measurement for setting key leads in a piano action, because it's actually very difficult to repeat. It's subject to misinterpretation. It changes over time with humidity. There's a lot of issues with down weight. Not only does it not represent the way the piano feels, it's also a very quirky measurement. And when we actually do a weight analysis, a front weight analysis on piano keys, we see that the results are quite chaotic. And I've got two actions here, one from a Steinway M from 1918. This piano is 100 years old. And we have also one from a Teflon era piano. And I'm going to show you, this is called a smart chart. And it's actually a way of recording measurements of front weight. This is a front weight smart chart. What's the best way to show this here? Abigail, could you hold up this corner here, right here? It's my daughter, Abigail. Say hi. So here we have, this is essentially a graph of the front weight of this 1918 Steinway M. We have, this is the front weight value, and this is note 1 to 88. So these black marks represent the actual front weights measured with the scale. So these are the actual, this is a down force that's contributing to the down weight in this piano. These were set in the factory. When I first got into this business, I was told repeatedly by old-timers, which I'm getting to be, don't touch those weights in the keys, they were put in the factory. Now, this is a wonderful thing, except for the fact that when you actually analyze the weights, they're not necessarily very well scaled. Pianos are all about scales. Piano playing is about scales. Piano design is about scales. We have string scales that are very accurate. The string length and the bridge, the way the soundboard is, it's an important design feature. It's part of the identity of what the piano is. Unfortunately, in piano actions, what pianists feel are weights, masses in the actions. The biggest one is the hammer, but also the lead weight mass in the key is something that the pianist feels. And it's something they react to when they play the piano. So we want scales to have the best playing pianos. We want the weights that are in the action to be scaled. That means hammer weights need to be scaled and key weights need to be scaled. And this is a measure of the key weight. And we see that it's very uneven. Why is that uneven? Well, it's because down weight is a very inaccurate measure. It's also a reflection of the original hammer weight. We don't know if the hammer weight was even. Hammer weights are just cut from a sheet of tapered felt, but not necessarily a smooth, stepped weight. So what we want to do, and what I've been doing for 25 years to make really great feeling actions, is to scale the weights, scale the front weights, and scale the strike weights. And what we're going to do in this case is, here we have, this is my medium zone here. This is would be considered very low weight, and this would be very high weight. And part of the SNAP method is to use generic front weight scales. And we have 3 front weight scales: a low medium scale, which is associated with lighter actions, a medium scale, which is associated with medium actions, and a high scale, which is associated with more firm feeling actions. In this piano, we're going to take a medium scale, which is the red lines, which means we're going to actually add key weights to bring the front weights up, and we're going to do it in a manner where the front weights are perfectly scaled. So this is actually becomes once the weights are set this way, it's going to help the pianist. They're going to feel that evenness of weight in the response to the keys. And in this piano is actually quite low. There's nothing normal. When you measure pianos, we could measure another piano from this period, and the key weights might be up here. They might be more even. They might be less even. The key weights are not, in a traditional sense of piano building, the key weights are not a designed feature. They're merely something to make the down weight even. And in that respect, it's a very inaccurate way of balancing an action. So what we do is we start with a very nice, smooth front weight. And that's going to help make the feel. But it's going to do more than that, and we'll get into that. Just to look at another example. Thank you, Abigail. This is a piano, Steinway L, from the late Teflon era. Now you can see this is quite a scale. It looks maybe like a piece of music. It's hard to say. We have huge differences in the key weighting from and adjacent keys. This is an example of really a very poorly leaded keyboard. And just to take these two examples to show you how much variation, I got it. How much variation there is in key weighting scales. So when somebody says to you, don't touch those lead weights, they were put in the factory, it would be nice if that was true. And I'm going to show you that that can be true, and we are going to make it true by this new approach to key balancing. How are we doing? Any questions so far?
So I'm looking at the questions feed here. I'll just tell you what I'm seeing.
Yeah, I'm not getting any questions on the screen here.
There's a separate questions feed. So David Skolnick asked the relationship between front weight scales and front weight ceiling.
Okay,
Sort of a question.
that's a good question. Front weight ceiling, I published in 2000. And here, yeah. Is this a good angle? We have 3 scales here that are part of the SNAP method. You should have access to the SNAP scales, front weight scales.
I'll give them in a couple minutes.
Yeah, you'll have access it through the webinar page. But we have 3 generic scales. One is associated with firm action, the middle scale, and you can see them, they're darkened, these darkened front weights here. So my firm scale is what I call front weight ceiling, which I published in February or March 2000. So what I've added is these 2 other scales which define the normal zone. So this is what I'm calling the normal zone. If you're within that zone, it's not an abnormal piano. It's going to be a functional piano, not any kind of extreme. So the front weight ceiling is the top, is that high front weight snap specification. Got it. I'll just drop it down like that.
And I got 2 more questions. Okay. Okay, one is for maybe later.
And sort
Okay.
of unrelated, but I'll just mention it to
All
you
right.
now. Requesting a tour of the workshop maybe during the
Okay.
intermission. That's Kiersey.
With
And
with
then-
musical accompaniment.
Yeah, musical accompaniment. But the other question was probably relevant, just to address quickly, if it's useful to have the toolkit while they're watching a lecture.
No.
No. Okay.
I mean,
Or it
just
could
watch
be
just
useful if
what-
they have it. Specifically.
Well, it'd be useful to have precision touch design toolkit and action model at hand.
I mean here or
No, for them.
for them.
They are.
Well, I would just watch the lecture and don't be distracted by doing anything except listening and watching. And really, I appreciate your questions, and I want to know how you're thinking about what I'm saying. So don't be shy about typing away.
Cool.
Okay.
All right, so a nice taste of direct lecture from David Stanwood on the topic. And again, that question is a useful one to address. And I think that's the advantage of some of this content we have. You can watch it, you can absorb it, you can take notes, and then you can go back to it and you could watch it again and you can have your tools handy. The specific point I think that he made in that moment was, we had the live lecture, we were streaming it to people like Kiersey, who's all the way, on the other side of the globe. And so there's that live component where people can interact and comment. And so you might want to just pay attention to the lecture at that moment and then come back to the member area and review the content later. And we should also have, for subscribers of these lectures, that collateral content should be in the member area. Sometimes we did a switch over from a previous platform. Sometimes if it's not there, you just let me know and we'll make sure you get that those pieces of content. I'll do what I did in previous couple of weeks. If anybody's interested in any one of the lectures that we show today, I can offer a discount, let's say for about a week from now until we do next Saturday's session. So feel free to email me at ethan@pianotechniciansmasterclass.com. Let me write that in the chat here. Yeah, just send me a little note, say, hey, I was at the lecture today, or if somebody's kind of reviewing the recording on YouTube or something within this week. Today's the 5th of November, so give it about 7 days to make this valid. Give me an email and we'll set you up with a discount. And I think, I think today also, just if anybody isn't a subscriber of Piano Technicians Masterclasses and you're interested in getting started, I could also offer a discount on the first month, but email me if you're interested and I'll let you know what we can offer. Special deal for folks that are paying close attention. All right, cool. Well, this next one I'm really excited about. It's from Jude Reveley's workshop outside of Boston. And so we get a chance to kind of see, a little bit of video content. We had a live camera, or actually some pre-recorded content, which is a great opportunity in his case to bring you some views and some understanding of what's going on in his workshop. All right, so let's get to that lecture. I'll bring that up in a moment.
if we could be doing keyboards. So about whether it makes a difference if one key's 12 and the other key's 13. We can kind of expect that, that there's going to trailed and where the capstan is installed. When I've designed keyboards for keyboard makers, at one point when I was working with Rick Wheeler, I said, I'm designing an AutoCAD, and Bruce Clark had taught me to use 4 decimal places. And I asked about what the tolerance was for keyboard makers. It's like, well, a couple of millimeters. I was like, oh, okay. So, with wood, it's expanding and contracting by a couple of millimeters, meaning that I would say that, we're always trying to work, say, within a 0.5 millimeter max. But if you add up all the different levers in a keyboard, you know, 1/4 millimeter here and there, you know, that's where the ratio is going to reflect that. Which I always like to point out that that's what's so important about aftertouch, because aftertouch is what reconciles the difference of the ratio from note to note. Because what a pianist is really going to feel is not that you have 10 millimeters of key dip, but they're going to sense whether the aftertouch feels even. So once you've gone through your final regulation, you want to kind of abandon, you know, perfect key dip and focus just on aftertouch, and that will give you a real, you know, kind of good result with your players. Okay, so if there's no other questions about the you know, the basic tools, I just want to give you a quick tour of Bruce's program. Bruce Clark, not Bruce Stevens. Nick Gravagna also has one that I own, and I'm trying to work with it because his is the only one that I believe is commercially available. But Bruce Clark's program will be available pretty soon. I think he's you know, kind of getting ready to release both his scaling and action program. It's really designed for making new keyboards, so it might be kind of tricky as a diagnostic tool, but if you know what you're doing, you can kind of back into it and get some really cool data on how to set up a particular action. The reason I'm going to show this and the action model is just because these aren't tools you'd necessarily use for just doing your in-home evaluation of someone's action, but because we're using them to kind of demonstrate some of the points, I thought it'd be kind of neat to you know, to show these. So Ethan, if we could play the key and action calculator video, 2 minutes.
Give me 1 second. That's still loading up.
And in the meantime, feel free, you'll be watching the video, so it'll be hard for you to chat, but if you have questions, you can also put it in the text box.
Okay, so I want to show you this program, which this is the beta test version that Bruce Clark designed. And the piano that we're going to be working with today is an actual piano out in the field. It's a Steinway O, Model O, for the Little White Church in New Hampshire. It's a job that I'm doing with Will Truitt, a technician in New Hampshire. And we've have a new keyboard that's been made for this piano, and this is how it was originally modeled. We start by entering the piano data, scale stick information, action cavity dimensions, regulation dimensions, stuff about the shank, repetition, and the key. And then we have the shank setup, which will be, you know, the boring distance, the shank height, the repetition setup, the spread, jack angle, rep center height. And then finally we hit calculate, and we get the action setup, which shows all the ratios between the individual levers. And very important to us are these keyboard specifications, including the front lever arm, back lever arm, key ratio, key front to capstan, the balance height, the shoe thickness. So when I'm working with an existing keyboard, so if you want to show over here, there's a printout which will give me all the dimensions, more dimensions than you are probably would ever want to work with, unless you're building a new keyboard. But it's a lot of information that you can use for setting up an existing action if you're just rebuilding it or refurbishing it. So in this case, we have the original key stick, and we're obviously not going to be changing the key proportion or the shoe. So we want to make sure that we work everything else so that we have a shoe that's going to be 3 millimeters thick, and that the key proportion is going to be 138 millimeters. But this is the model that we're going to be working with to kind of demonstrate how balance weight works.
Okay, so the chart that I showed you before, let me pull that up again. Share the screen. To share. And this. All right. Everybody see the little Christmas colored numbers? Okay.
Yep.
So what I did was I printed this out and then took some adhesive spray and rolled it onto a dowel, and then slipped that dowel into a PVC tube, which I made a window in, so that I can roll it and choose a specific balance weight. And then that would show me how to arrange my paired weights for a given balance weight. And the dowel sits in front of the of a little tray that I made out of maple, where I can arrange my weights. So let me give you a more detailed tour of that. So let's roll the paired balance weight calculator.
Okay, if I haven't mentioned it already, I'd like to give a shout out to some of the pioneers of touch weight. First and foremost, we have David Stanwood, who invented the equation of balance. But then there's Bruce Stevens, David Vanderlip, and Steve Schnell, who I took a class on grand action balancing at a convention. I think it was in Denver a few years back. And Bruce and David were teaching this class about using paired balance weights to evaluate touch weight. And they had this, this chart here that they handed out. And what you'll notice is that it shows different balance weights and the paired weights that you use to determine what the friction is. So you have friction moving at the top, you have your paired balance weights, and the only thing that it doesn't show is the down weight. So the bottom is the up weight, and the sum of these two is the down weight. What I did is I made this kind of handy organizer of the paired weights, but what I do is I show the down weight. So the down weight is in red, and the up weight is in green. Above the line are the two paired weights that you'll use to determine what makes up a particular balance weight. So here you have a 37 gram balance weight. Your friction is along this number, and then your weights are all set up. So you grab, so if I want to choose a 12 friction at a 37 gram balance weight, I've got these two which I will use, and that will give me a 26 up weight and 48 down weight. So you have to kind of arrange all of your weights to a particular balance weight. If I want to change it, I can just rotate this, and now I'm at a 38 gram balance weight. And now I need to redistribute these to represent that. So I would need an 18 here and a 29 instead of a 20 and a 27, or sorry, 28 and a 27. But this is a really kind of a neat tool for going through a piano, because remember, we're going to try to make a consistent balance weight, and that will have been determined by the time we get to that part of balancing out the keyboard.
Okay, one thing that I should say, I sort of called out the numbers wrong, so hopefully that's not confusing. And also on this, I need to kind of like secure this, because in the video it sort of slid over so that it should have been lined up with the, I know you can't really see this, and I don't want to turn it up too far and have all the weight spill out, but it starts at the 8 grams, whereas I had it kind of slid over at the 9 grams. So if you were reading the weights that were on there and then comparing them to the actual numbers on the sheet, they weren't lined up. So just ignore that fact, but you get the idea. It really takes 2 of these sets to kind of have everything you need from like 8 grams to 16 grams friction. I'm not going to work with anything really out of that range, because if you're out of that range to begin with, there's some serious issues going on that need to be addressed first via alignment, regulation, or just the condition of the parts. So that it would be kind of a waste of time to kind of try to get any touch weight data with a piano that's, I mean, we're talking like, obviously if you got like major verdigris and the key doesn't even return, you're not going to start off doing a touch weight evaluation of a piano like that. You could try to treat the parts temporarily by putting some ProTech in there and just getting them moving, and then getting an idea, because it's not crazy to see 20 grams of friction, but you still want to get an idea of how these parts are set up in terms of their overall touch weight, the hammer weight compared to the ratio, et cetera. So you can do that. I mean, in the field, you're going to be taking just samples of like, all your C's and then taking that data and trying to figure out what's going on with the piano. Does it have an issue with the key ratio or the overall ratio or the hammer weights compared to the front weight? And that's what this balance weight system can do for us. It also improves the accuracy of the data that we're taking down, because it's really all about finding a matching speed, where we're looking for, traditionally we would put a down weight on there and we would tap the action and then go to the next note. Whereas here we're trying to keep things in motion. There's a little bit of a, kind of dance, a rhythm that we're trying to achieve to find the matched speeds. That's the key, is a matched speed between the up weight and the down weight. And then we try to get it to go as slow as possible. That improves our accuracy of determining what the friction is. So I'll show you a little demo now on an actual piano where we're using the paired balance weights. So if we could cue the demo with paired balance weight calculator on the Mason & Hamlin T3.
Okay, so here's another great tool made by Christian Bolduc for just doing a quick evaluation of a whole keyboard, where I want to take down my down weights and up weights. I'll start off with the down weights and kind of go through and use this to just get some quick information about the piano. You can kind of just move it down the line like this, write it down, and then move to your up weights and get data that way. However, once I've got a keyboard that's balanced out, and in this case, this is a new keyboard for the Mason T. This keyboard was made by Roseland Piano in Atlanta, Georgia, with some modifications to the original that they incorporated into the its original frame, new key sticks. It's already been leaded using the equation of balance, so that these are front weights that are predetermined. And now if I really want to dial it in, I know that this has been set up to a 37-gram balance weight. So I can choose I'm always grabbing from the top and putting it on the top. And I can go through, and you'll notice that the speed is consistent. That's the important aspect of using these paired balance weights. You're looking at up weight and down weight really at the same time, because when you get them in motion, that's when they tend to give you the most consistent result. When you're just kind of going along and say using this, that's good for initial data, but the key here is matching speeds. Now that speed is a bit fast, so I could look at it. That's a 13 friction. I can now move down to a 12. And you'll see it goes slightly slower, but still kind of on the fast side. I'm looking to really kind of slow it down. That's not a bad speed. Looks like they really should be matching in speed regardless, because the balance weight's not going to change. So regardless of how I've changed the friction, I'm kind of looking for that. And sometimes it's by putting it in this constant motion that you get that data. This is the toughest, the kind of most unspecific part of evaluating the touch weight components. So that's an 11. I can go down one more and see how that looks. Again, the speeds are matched, but it's just slower. So which one of these is it? I think the slower that we can kind of get it where it's still moving, the better. So that would be about a 10. I would say the friction is somewhere between a 10 and 11. The friction's going to be our biggest variable, always. I mean, it's going to change with the weather, and that's why we don't want to be setting up the touch weight for a piano with friction kind of in the mix. We want to just kind of remove that and look at balance weight as opposed to just down weight or just up weight.
All right, cool. So
All right, cool. So we're about at the end of today's session. Hope you enjoyed that. Hope you if you haven't seen some of this content, you got a taste for what's available. And also I think there's a number of us that have access to this content, but you got to have some sort of a little bit of a tour to know what you've got access to. So hopefully for those of you that are signed up as subscribers, you know what you might want to dig into a little bit deeper. So yeah, that's been today's session. Glad to have mostly been able to deliver you some educational content with just a few words in between. And we're about ready to sign off. So remember, I did make an offer both to folks in the Zoom call, but also if you're seeing us out on socials, it's the 5th of November. So you got another 7 days. You can reach out to me, Ethan at pianotechniciansmasterclass.com. If you're interested in, any one of these lectures, maybe you want all 3 of them, maybe you just want to start your subscription to Piano Technicians Masterclasses. In any and all of those cases, I'll offer you a little bit of a discount, maybe a big discount. So reach out to me and just inquire. Love to sort of reward those folks that are paying attention and really care about what they're doing out there. So feel free to reach out. So I don't know that there's much else. We put a link in the chat if people want to subscribe to Radio Hour. That's just, I'll explain more about that in the outro, but we do have a link that we put in the chat so that you can know how to subscribe to Radio Hour and come back with us more easily and efficiently every week and get the recordings. So yeah, we'll wrap it out. We've reached the end of another musical journey here at Piano Tech Radio Hour. Thanks to everyone for showing up. Thanks to Mario. Thanks to Jude. Thanks to David Stanwood for contributing their really priceless and precious knowledge to share with everyone. Here you can see a lot of that stuff was, some, at least for myself, it was very hidden from view for many years. And so it's great for it to be so much more accessible. Again, remember, we're brought to you by Piano Technicians Masterclasses, where that content was drawn from. This is cutting edge instruction from piano industry masters without leaving your home. For those of you that joined us today by signing up for this session individually or hopping in on the socials, you can find your life more convenient by subscribing to Piano Tech Radio Hour. Just $16 a month to get the recording of today's session in our member area, as well as automatic registration for each week's new session. You can sign up for that at pianotechniciansmasterclass.com/PTRH direct access, PTRH-direct access. And now, although that may sound complicated, it is written out again in the chat. I'll make sure that is also in the chat for the review that's going out on the social channels. And that way folks can know how to do that and join us in the Zoom call next week. That'd be great. All right. Let me just make sure there's nothing I forgot in my notes here. Yeah, I think that's about it for today. So thank you guys so much for joining us, and we will see you next week. Thank you so much for being here. Bye-bye.